28 law enforcement officers as suspects, not investigators in a huge $1 million work. The truth runs deeper.
Planned immigration enforcement targeting Somalians in the Twin Cities.
Hungry children wind up in the hands of a Somali terrorist group.
It's 4:47 in the morning. Minneapolis is frozen solid. The streets are empty. The sky is the color of concrete. And then, simultaneously, across 17 different locations spanning 3 counties, the doors come off. Black SUVs, tactical gear, night vision, FBI, ICE, DEA, all of them moving at the exact same second on the exact same signal. In one house on the south side, agents find 11 kilograms of fentanyl stuffed inside a child's bedroom wall. In a warehouse near the industrial corridor, they find $2.3 million in vacuum-sealed cash stacked 4 feet high. In an apartment in Brooklyn Park, they pull a man out of bed, a man who, by morning, will be identified as the operational hub of the entire network. 400 arrests. One coordinated morning, $50 million in narcotics, cash, and assets seized. And buried inside the charging documents, a detail so explosive that federal prosecutors reportedly debated whether to release it at all, the names of 28 law enforcement officers. Not as investigators, as suspects. Let that sink in. 28 people who wore badges, who took oaths, who were supposed to be hunting this network, were allegedly inside it, feeding it, protecting it, for years. And here's the part that should terrify every single person watching this. This wasn't a ring that was hiding. It was hiding in plain sight, because somebody made sure it could. Today, we are going inside the most explosive federal law enforcement operation Minneapolis has ever seen. And I'm going to show you 3 things nobody else is connecting. First, how a street gang that started with 30 guys and a corner in South Minneapolis quietly built a $50 million fentanyl empire that stretched across the entire metro area. Second, how that empire survived for over a decade because 28 people with badges were allegedly on the payroll, tipping off raids, killing investigations, and letting shipments walk. Third, why this story doesn't end in Minneapolis. Why what they found in those charging documents points to something bigger, darker, and more dangerous than any one city can contain. And here's the part that should make every law-abiding person in this country furious. Some of those 28 officers, they're still collecting paychecks right now. Let's break it down. Early 2010s, South Minneapolis, a neighborhood called Phillips, tight streets, high poverty, and a crew that called themselves the North Star Syndicate. 30, maybe 40 guys at first, moving pills, mainly oxy, nothing that made the federal radar twitch. But here's the thing about fentanyl. When fentanyl really arrived around 2015, it changed the math completely. Because fentanyl is 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine, is microscopic in size, is almost untraceable in transit. And the markup? The markup is obscene. A kilogram of fentanyl sourced through cartel networks costs between $3,500 and $5,000 at the wholesale level. That same kilogram, pressed into counterfeit pills and sold on the streets of Minneapolis, generates between $80,000 and $160,000 in retail revenue per kilogram. And by 2018, according to the federal indictment unsealed this week, the North Star Syndicate wasn't moving kilograms. They were moving hundreds of kilograms per year. Let me do that math for you. At conservative estimates, based on figures in the charging documents, the syndicate was generating somewhere between $8 and $12 million annually by 2019. By 2023, that number had grown to over $50 million in total network value. Narcotics inventory, real estate holdings, shell companies, vehicles, and cash accounts spread across 14 different financial institutions. $50 million, built in a city of 430,000 people. And somehow, through 11 years of operation across 3 presidential administrations, not a single major federal prosecution came close to touching the top of this organization. Not one. Now, here's where it gets absolutely insane. Because it wasn't for lack of evidence. According to sources familiar with the investigation, federal task force agents had flagged the North Star Syndicate as early as 2017. There were surveillance files. There were confidential informants. There were intercepted communications. And every single time an investigation started gaining traction, it died. Tips leaked out before raids could execute. Informants were burned, one of them violently, in what prosecutors now believe was a targeted killing in 2021. Warrants were filed and then quietly shelved. And investigators who pushed too hard? They got reassigned. One senior DEA agent, a 17-year veteran who had been building the case against the syndicate since 2019, was transferred to a field office in rural Montana in March of 2022, 8 months after he submitted a formal memo alleging internal interference in his investigation. Just think about that. He files a memo saying someone is killing his case from the inside, and the response is to put him on a plane to Montana. I'm not editorializing. That sequence of events is in the court record. Now, if that story alone isn't enough to make you furious, drop a comment right now. Tell me what you're thinking. Tell me if this shocks you, or if it doesn't surprise you at all. Hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications, because this thing is still developing as we speak, and you need to be here when the next piece drops. And hit the like button. It tells the algorithm that people need to see this story. And they do. Let's talk about the 28. Because this is where the story stops being about drugs and starts being about something that cuts at the foundation of every institution you're supposed to be able to trust. According to the federal charging documents, the network maintained what prosecutors describe as a structured law enforcement access program. I want you to hear that phrase again. A structured law enforcement access program. That is bureaucratic language for a corruption operation, so organized they ran it like a department. Here's how it worked. Embedded within the syndicate's operational structure was a dedicated communications channel, encrypted, compartmentalized, through which participating officers would relay intelligence. Upcoming raids, warrant applications, the names of active informants, the scheduling of surveillance operations, all of it flowing from inside police departments and federal task forces directly to the network's leadership. In exchange, officers received payments averaging between $3,000 and $15,000 per transaction, routed through a web of cash payments, cryptocurrency transfers, and, in at least 3 documented cases, direct real estate transactions involving properties the syndicate controlled. Several of the 28 didn't just sell information. They actively intervened in operations. The indictment describes one incident in October 2022 where a scheduled federal search of a North Minneapolis storage facility was aborted 40 minutes before execution, after an encrypted message was sent to the network warning them to clear the location. The storage facility was empty when agents arrived. The shipment that had been there, estimated at over $800,000 in product, was gone. Investigators later recovered security footage showing the facility being cleared by a vehicle registered to a shell company. That shell company, it turns out, was linked to a sergeant in a metro area law enforcement agency. That sergeant is now one of the 28. Connection number 3, the recruiter. And here's where it gets deeply sinister. Prosecutors allege that the network didn't wait for corrupt officers to come to them. They went hunting. A man identified in court documents only as the liaison, whose identity is still partially sealed pending additional indictments, is alleged to have systematically targeted law enforcement personnel through a combination of financial pressure, manufactured compromising situations, and direct financial solicitation. He reportedly identified officers who were behind on bills, officers going through divorces, officers with gambling problems, and he approached them, not aggressively, carefully, methodically, the way you recruit an asset, because that's exactly what he was doing. And here's where it gets absolutely jaw-dropping. According to testimony from a cooperating witness, the liaison maintained a physical ledger, a written record, names, dates, payments, what each officer provided in exchange. That ledger, reportedly running to over 200 pages, was recovered during the early morning raids. 200 pages. The FBI reportedly described it internally as the most comprehensive law enforcement corruption document seized in the history of the Minneapolis field office. Now here's what I want you to sit with. Every overdose death in Hennepin County during those years, and there were hundreds of them, happened in part because the people tasked with stopping the supply chain were protecting it instead. Every grieving family, every community vigil, every candlelight memorial for someone who took a pill they didn't know was fentanyl. All of it, allegedly, made worse by 28 people who knew exactly what they were doing and cashed the check anyway. This is about basic right and wrong. I want to hear from you. Do you think the 28 is the full number, or do you believe this corruption goes even deeper than what's been charged? Drop your take in the comments below. If you're finding this investigation valuable, hit that like button. Right now, because we haven't even gotten to the part that takes this national yet. Now here's the wild part. Minneapolis is not the end of this story. It is the beginning, because the charging documents contain something that has barely been reported anywhere. A reference, 3 pages buried in a 340-page indictment, to what prosecutors call lateral network nodes. In plain language, other cities. According to the indictment, the North Star Syndicate didn't just supply Minneapolis. It operated as a regional distribution hub that pushed product outward to at least 6 other metropolitan areas: Milwaukee, Kansas City, Indianapolis, Columbus, Detroit, Omaha, 6 cities. And investigators believe the same structured law enforcement access program, the same model of officer recruitment and intelligence bribery, was replicated in at least 3 of those cities. Right now, as we speak, federal investigators in at least 2 of those metro areas are reportedly conducting parallel reviews of their law enforcement personnel files. The federal response has been extraordinary. ICE, FBI, DEA, and the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force all operating in concert. Search warrants executed across 17 locations in a single morning. 400 individuals taken into custody in the largest single-day narcotics operation in Minnesota history. And U.S. Attorney General sources reportedly describing this as a template operation, meaning the playbook developed for Minneapolis is already being handed to field offices in other cities. Which brings us to the most chilling unanswered question of all. If this network ran for 11 years, if 28 officers were allegedly embedded inside it, if the evidence was there and the investigations kept dying, then who, specifically, at what level of authority, made the call to pull the plug on the investigation every single time it got close? Because the street-level officers named in the indictment were tools. Tools have handlers, and the charging documents right now stop short of naming those handlers. The question of who, at senior levels of law enforcement leadership or politics, provided the protection that allowed this to survive for over a decade? That question is still open. And that is why federal prosecutors have stated publicly that this is not the end of the indictments. There are more coming, which means one of the most powerful people in this story hasn't been named yet. And that person knows it. Here's what you need to do right now. For steps. First, drop a comment below. I want to know 2 things from you. Do you think we'll ever see the full chain of command exposed all the way to the top? And do you believe your city has a version of this that hasn't been cracked open yet? I read every single comment. Every one. Your answers shape where this investigation goes next. Second, if this changed how you think about what's happening in American cities, if it shocked you, made you angry, made you scared, hit that like button. Smash it. Because this story is competing with cat videos and dance clips for the algorithm's attention. The only way it reaches the people who need it is if you push it there. So hit it. Third, subscribe and turn on notifications right now. Because the next round of indictments is reportedly coming within weeks. The 28 names are going to start being unsealed. The lateral network cities are going to start appearing in headlines. And when they do, you need to be here for the breakdown. Fourth, share this everywhere. Text it. Post it. Every platform you're on. Get this in front of as many eyes as possible. Because the only way this story forces real accountability is if the pressure is public, sustained, and impossible to ignore. Because the only way we get justice is if enough people demand it. I'll see you in the next investigation. And trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next.